T-minus 12 days to my ADHD assessment. I do want to give a shout out to Bingus, my beloved, I think is your name. Username @catgoeskek, because you commented underneath, you said good luck with your assessment, and I realized afterwards that makes so much more sense calling it an assessment rather than an ADHD diagnosis, because diagnosis is only after the fact. So in today's vlog, I just wanted to go over one of my reservations about getting diagnosed with ADHD and why. I mean, it took me 6 months to ask for the referral from my GP to then be able to go see a psychiatrist. And yes, you can say that part of that might be the potential ADHD and you're just procrastinating, whatever, and that's certainly part of it. But I did have some hesitation or reservations about getting diagnosed. And this is just my personal beliefs that I'm talking about here. I'm by no means calling anyone out on anything. But I come from, let's say I don't like making excuses. And primarily I didn't want to have the option to use ADHD as an excuse for anything. And in part of my brain it went, well, if I got a diagnosis of ADHD, that's going to give me the option of saying, well, I didn't follow through on this and I can say that's because of my ADHD, or I was late to here, that's because of my ADHD, or I had an emotional outburst and that's because of my ADHD. And to give you context, I had a younger sister and she passed very unexpectedly from diabetes, and obviously that's a shocking thing to have happen. You don't get to say goodbye because it just happened so suddenly and unexpectedly. But I went back to work. It was either the very same day or the next day. Basically, I took no time off work whatsoever. And that's really driven by this need in me to not make excuses for anything. If there's a way to do it, and particularly if I owe you something, like if you've contracted me to do something, if we have an agreement to do something, like I have an agreement with a client, I will follow through. Like, unless I'm literally dead, I'm going to follow through. So that's the sort of person that I am. And so I see quite often on social media people, well, they're celebrating their ADHD, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they almost make sort of neurotypical people, they call them boring sometimes. And it's almost dismissive, and it's almost like this exclusive club to join, and when you join you get all these perks, and I don't want to be that person. It's not, what I want is my assessment. And if there's a diagnosis, great. But here's the thing. People like to argue about whether ADHD exists or not, whether you have ADHD or not. I don't think that's the right question to ask. I think the right question to ask is, are you happy with your life? Are you happy with where it's going? Do you feel like you're living up to your potential? And if you are, great. And whether you have ADHD or not, it doesn't matter. If your life is going great and the strategies you have in place are working for your life, great. If you're not where you want to be in life, whether you have ADHD or not, let's say you have problems prioritizing, you have problems with time management, you have problems with focusing, apart from the medical interventions, which you do need a diagnosis from a psychiatrist to get, all the non-medical interventions anyone can try, and you should, because I don't want to hold back something from you because, you don't have an ADHD diagnosis, so I can't talk to you because you're not one of the cool kids. It's that sort of ADHD is the cool kids club, and I get that, because on the other side you have ADHD being treated with stigma. Like, some people see people with ADHD and go, oh, you can't pay attention, whatever, you're just faking it, you should, develop some focus and discipline. So I get it. I do understand it, but as I said in yesterday's video, I'm right down that middle of, I do believe ADHD exists, but I really am very wary, and again, this is just myself, of having it available to use as an excuse. And I've already told you, like when my sister passed, I went back to work straight away. On the other hand, with all this, what I didn't realize I would get is almost a validation or an explanation for some of the things that I struggle with. I'm waiting for my assessment, so I don't know whether I have ADHD or not. But when I was talking to, again, Eliza, who I mentioned yesterday, who has ADHD, and she's a med student, so she's done a lot of her own research into this, going through papers and things like that. And she mentioned emotional dysregulation. Now, I'm typically a very in control, stoic kind of person. I think at one point, I don't know if this is true now, but at one point I certainly believed that if you lose control emotionally, then the other person wins. And I'm very competitive, so I don't want the other person to win, so I would always stay in control. Got to the point where in school, some of I wouldn't call them friends, but my classmates would like try to jump out of places and scare me to try and get a reaction from me, and I took great pride in never flinching from anything. That's how hard this is, all because of the competitiveness in me. But I'm normally very in control of my emotions. But what I would find also is that at times, for really no logical reason whatsoever, I would get very annoyed, very frustrated, or even very mad or very angry. Now, the stupidest one is when I sneeze. I don't know why. When I sneeze, I get really angry at myself. I hate sneezing. Saying it sounds so stupid, but I hate sneezing with a passion. It just seems so unnecessary, so uncouth, so uncivilized, and so I really hate sneezing. So normally when I sneeze, I also swear. I had a friend staying with me over from the UK, and she thought it was hilarious. She called it sneeze swearing or something. So that there's that funny example of, let's maybe call what could be emotional dysregulation. But a bigger example is when I was playing tennis. Now, I love tennis. I used to be a tennis coach, and I try to play once a week with my best friend. And on one occasion, this was several months ago, there are 4 courts where we play. 2 and 2 synthetic grass and 2 hard court made of concrete. Now the concrete courts were undergoing resurfacing to keep them new, give them a fresh coat of paint. So we were playing on the grass courts, which are right next door. So it's pretty much 4 courts adjacent to one another. And there was a workman on the hard courts using like a sander, but it's almost like a lawnmower as well. So you push it along, and it's this sort of big belt that I imagine is smoothing out the concrete. And as you can imagine, it's really, really loud. Now, we were playing next door to it. Picture this, it's loud enough that my friend on the other side, I'd never be able to hear what he's saying. Even if he's yelling, wouldn't be able to hear it. There's no point. So it's loud, and no one's going to say they like that sound. But generally, and it's not a high-pitched dental drill sound, it's just a droning sound of a belt. You can imagine what it sounds like. No one's going to say they like that sound. But you just get on with it, and you're playing tennis, you just play tennis. It's fine. For me, that sound I can only describe it as catastrophically debilitating. I don't know what happened even to this day. I love playing tennis. It's like my escape. It's like my form of meditation. But I was so unable to play because I was so distracted and disabled by that sound, and got so angry about it that my best friend actually said, do you want to just stop? Like, he could tell that something was wrong with me. And I got so angry that I was just thinking, if I could go over there and punch that man in the face, knock him out, I would do it. Now, again, I'm not that person. As I said, I'm normally very stoic. I'm really easy-go-lucky. That was completely unlike me. And I could even had an out-of-body experience going, this is completely illogical. Why are you overreacting like this? But at the same time, I couldn't help it. That was my emotional reaction to that sound. And it was completely debilitating. It's not like, just focus on I couldn't just focus on the tennis. It was impossible. It's not like it's hard to, and I don't want to know. It was just impossible. And I know, like, when that sound stopped for a brief moment, the feeling of relief, I can feel even now. I can remember the feeling of tension in my shoulders and my neck going up to my head, which gives you a headache, a tension headache. It just completely evaporated. And I was so blissfully relaxed. And then, of course, a few minutes later, it started again, and then it all went downhill again. But the point of the story is that without understanding that some people with ADHD have emotional dysregulation, or even that sensory disorders are a thing. Without knowing that, all I'm left with is, wow, I really overreacted to that. Shame on me. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have overreacted. I should have known better. I should have been able to control my emotions, basically. But hearing a story that Eliza told me, which was similar, not the sound, but sensory sort of overstimulation and everything just feeling wrong and causing just a state of complete overwhelm. When I heard that, I was like, oh wow, this is the point of the story. That explains what was happening to me. Do you know what I mean? So it's no longer like, oh, I failed. I should have known better. And I'm saying that because other people, like my best friend was there, same noise, and he didn't have that reaction to it. So rather than having that judgment on me, like I should have known better, I should do it better next time, knowing that there might be something wired slightly differently that caused me to have that giant emotional overreaction or dysregulation. Not to use that as an excuse, again, because I don't like making excuses, but to sort of explain like, oh, okay, that's why that happened. It's not just me. And here's the kicker, it's not my fault. And see, that goes dangerously close to an excuse, but realizing that, okay, well, my best friend didn't have that reaction, so it's very easy to then judge yourself and go, well, he didn't, so I shouldn't. But understanding that his brain might be wired differently to mine, and so he reacts physiologically, biologically, whatever you want to call it, differently. He's wired differently. That's why he doesn't have the challenge, but I do. And that really sort of, not from a place of, oh, well, every time I have, emotional dysregulation, I now have an excuse. But it just was a weight literally lifted off my shoulders going, okay, that explains so much. And it did, because the other thing growing up, and I still to this day, I hate going out where there's loud music. Like the thought of going to festivals is hell on earth to me. And it's not because I don't like music, because I love music. I played the violin since I was 2, and I basically love all types of music. I really, really love music to get you in the mood, to get you pumped up. Now, things like festivals, I don't particularly like drinking. I certainly don't use drugs, and I've always hated the idea of using drugs, so that's part of it. But festivals, nightclubs, loud music, but even when you go out to eat, when you go to restaurants, and some restaurants just insist on having this really inappropriately loud music over the top where you have to yell, like you're at dinner with someone just across the table and you have to yell to get heard. That always made me, again, angry. I just always hated it, whereas other people just seem to deal with it. But then again, I realized, hang on, it's that loud sound that in my mind just seems so unnecessary. So I'm trying to duck the sun as the sunrise is coming up. It doesn't matter, you're not here to look at my face. But I realized that probably explains, I can't objectively say, but it probably explains why I hated nightclubs, restaurants with really loud music, and why the idea of festivals is just so anathema to me, because it's just really loud music where you can't hear your own thoughts, you can't hear the person next to you, and again, it just becomes that sensory overwhelm. And so and this is probably the biggest thing that I hope to get with my ADHD assessment, if there is indeed a diagnosis. For me, again, not an excuse, because I hate that, but hopefully it's some sort of explanation as to some of the issues that I've dealt with that have always made me feel a little bit different, a little bit odd, a little bit weird, whatever you want to call it. I'm hoping to get let's call it a scientific explanation as to why I react differently, or why I have a different experience to what a lot of other people seem to. So I don't just end up feeling like, oh, you're weird or you're odd, or the worst case is there's something wrong with you. And like, you should know better, you need to work harder, you need to XYZ better. That's the real thing. And so it's not an excuse. I don't even know if it's a validation, but I think you understand what I mean. It's an explanation of this thing that I've been struggling with for so long. It's not just you've got to try harder. There's actually an explanation why this particular thing is harder for you than some other people. And look, the way my brain is wired, it has a lot of benefits as well. I don't want to discount that. So, my best friend, he's smart. He's very smart. And, he might be able to deal with that sound and I can't. That sound of that thing on the tennis court sanding. But on the other hand, he will ask me all the time when it comes to strategic problems, or he's got his child and he's having a problem with a biomechanical issue. And I said, he knew that I am good with biomechanics. I taught myself tennis, and part of that is learning biomechanics. I was teaching myself biomechanics before the word biomechanics was really even a thing. And so when all these experts come out now, it's funny to me because it's so obvious. But anyway, that might be the ADHD as well. But my point is, he will ask me to figure out seemingly really complicated, strategic, multifaceted problems for himself. And I can just look at it and go, the problem is that. And so you need to address that. Once you've addressed that, see what happens, maybe the problem will shift. But I'm really good at seeing a complicated problem and pinpointing that one thing to just pick at, you know what I mean? So as much as I might get, for example, angry when I sneeze, which is annoying. It's annoying to get angry. I hope I don't sneeze now because that'd be really funny. But as much as that's annoying to have a brain that gets angry when I sneeze, my brain does have huge upsides as well. So that was the main reason, I think, subconsciously at least, why I was hesitant to go down the assessment, the ADHD assessment or diagnostic pathway. Again, it's that I really don't want to make excuses, and I don't want that. I'm very wary of having the potential of being able to use ADHD as an excuse, or having anyone feel any pity for me. That's the other thing. But what pushed me over the edge was that it very may well explain some of the things that I've been dealing with, the challenges, and in doing that might give me some ways of mitigating them, or maybe even overcoming them, or at the very least maybe even leverage them into strength in some way. But that's the main thing. And I think if you are about to go down the assessment pathway, or if you have ADHD, or you think you might have ADHD, again, just go and Google ADHD, and again, you'll see it's very politicized, very religious. Like, people get really angry on social media when someone suggests that maybe ADHD, for example, is overdiagnosed. And I don't know the numbers, but that's a cockatoo. But their anger is not rational. It's like someone attacked their religion or their deepest held beliefs, and I'm wary of that. I get very wary when I'm around people who get overly angry about anything. So I hope that's helpful. I just wanted to put that out there. One of the reasons, I think the main reason why I was hesitant to get diagnosed, and why it took me, looking at that assessment, and why it took me 6 months, apart from the procrastination side of it. I'm going to leave it there because that cockatoo is going to be very loud and distracting. So hope this helps, and any questions, let me know. Any comments, let me know. I will help you in any way that I can, and I'll speak to you next time.